The dog had slept through the night for 5 years without exception. Until the night it mattered, then he didn't stop until someone followed him. Bear was not a rescue story. He was not a dog they had to fight for. He came into their home at 8 weeks old, grew to 75 pounds of amber gold fur, and settled into a life of such uncomplicated loyalty that the Okonkwo family sometimes joked that he was the most emotionally stable member of the household. He slept at the foot of the bed. He greeted each child by name, not by their actual names, of course, but by a specific individual gesture assigned to each of them over years of attention. He waited at the bus stop. He positioned himself beside whichever child was sick and stayed until the fever broke. He had never, in 5 years, woken either of them at night. Ife Okonkwo worked in hospital administration. Her husband, David, was a high school history teacher. Their son, Kofi, was 3 years old and had been healthy all of his short life with the exception of a respiratory virus in February that had kept them all inside for 2 miserable weeks. He had recovered completely. By mid-March, he was back to his normal self, loud, fast, interested in every object he was told not to touch. He had not been sick since. On the first Tuesday of April, Ife woke at 3:12 a.m. to Bear's nose on her shoulder. She assumed he needed to go outside. She sat up. He backed toward the door. She followed him down the hallway, fully expecting him to stop at the back door. He stopped at Kofi's room. He pressed his nose against the door, turned and looked at her, pressed his nose against the door again. Aoife opened the door. The room was quiet. The nightlight was on. Kofi was in his bed on his back, which was unusual. He always slept on his side, but she registered that dimly in the first half-second. What she registered more sharply was his color. She was beside him before she finished thinking the word. His skin had a pallor that had no business being there at 3 a.m. His lips were not blue, but they were not right. She put her hand on his chest and felt his breathing. Shallow, even present, but something about the rhythm was too quiet. She said his name. He didn't stir. She said it again, louder. Nothing. She picked him up, and the limpness in his body, not the loose limpness of deep sleep, but something heavier, made her say David before her feet had moved toward the door. Kofi's blood glucose in the ambulance registered at 44 milligrams per deciliter. The pediatric endocrinologist on duty, Dr. Serena Ando, explained it to them in the waiting room at 5:30 that morning. Post-viral hypoglycemia. Kofi's respiratory illness in February had disrupted his glycogen metabolism, and the residual effect, invisible, silent, showing no external symptoms, was still present 6 weeks later. When he didn't eat enough at dinner, his blood sugar had slid through the night without a single external alarm. At 44, Dr. Ando said, the brain is beginning to ration. The window before seizure and neurological consequences not long. She paused. What woke you? Aoife looked at David. Our dog, she said. Dr. Ando nodded once. She had heard that before. It did not surprise her the way it once might have. She had read the research. She knew that hypoglycemic breath produces isoprene at concentrations that shift as blood sugar drops, and that a dog's olfactory capability operates at parts per trillion. Bear had been tracking that shift since Kofi went to bed. He waited until it reached a threshold he understood as wrong. Then he came for her. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Kofi came home 2 days later. His metabolic function was monitored and confirmed normal. He was cleared. He ate a full dinner the first night back and asked immediately if Bear was allowed to sleep in his room. David said yes before Ife could answer. Bear spent that first night on the floor beside Kofi's bed. Ife checked on them at midnight, at 2 a.m., at 4. Every time Bear was awake, position between the door and the bed. Eyes open, unhurried, doing the thing he had always done in the quiet, paying attention. Has your dog ever done something in the middle of the night that made no sense in the moment until later? Tell us. These stories need to be heard. The nose-to-nose moment in the photograph on their refrigerator was taken on the Thursday after Kofi came home. Kofi had walked up to Bear in the kitchen, face to face, and pressed his small nose to Bear's cold one. Bear held completely still, both of them looking at each other from a distance of about 2 inches. David grabbed his phone and got the shot. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Bear's eyes in the photograph are soft and forward-focused. He is not looking at the camera. He is looking at Kofi, the way he always was. Next, what a woman with her toddler and her husky found out the hard way, that she had been misreading one of them for months. Dr. Ando had given them the science, but it was the veterinarian, their regular vet, Dr. Priya Kapoor, whom Ife called 2 days after Kofi came home, who gave them the detail that stayed with her the longest. Bear's olfactory system, Dr. Kapoor explained, processes information about Kofi continuously and in parallel with everything else. He is not actively investigating Kofi. He is, in the way all dogs process the world, simply aware. His nose takes in information the way eyes take in light, passively, automatically, without effort. The chemical profile of every person in his household is known to him the way a voice is known. He recognizes it instantly. He tracks changes in it the way a musician hears a wrong note, not because they are listening for it, but because the deviation from the known pattern is automatic. When Kofi's blood sugar dropped through the night, his breath chemistry changed. The change was gradual, an hour, perhaps 2. Bear had been registering the drift. At some point, the drift crossed a threshold that Bear's system classified, in whatever wordless way a dog classifies things, as wrong. He went to the bedroom. He woke Ife. He had no training for this. He had learned nothing about hypoglycemia, or isoprene, or blood glucose, or any of the clinical vocabulary that would later describe what he had done. He had simply been paying attention to Kofi for 2 years, every mealtime, every nap, every ordinary Tuesday. That attention produced the only outcome that mattered. The photo on the refrigerator stayed there. Aoife looked at it every morning. Bear at the counter, watching her make coffee, Kofi's school bag on the hook by the door, the EpiPen clip on the bag strap, everything in its place.